Right. Good afternoon, everybody. We have Yannick Ruiz with us today. He's going to be talking about It All Starts with Energy, and he has so much material. He's going to do part one today, and part two will be next Friday. It's all yours. Thank you.
Okay, so I thought about doing this webinar because we are, as neurofeedback practitioners, so interested in energy, and the brain consumes so much of it that it just makes sense to start here. Each time we're focusing a little bit more on functional systems, on functional health, on the everyday shift in how we feel, and this just seemed like a really good way to start. So I'm going to come at it from different perspectives so we can broaden the way that we see things and we can improve our scope of practice. So I like starting with this slide and asking people what they see. And for you, what would you see in this image or in this plot? Because it is very telling the way that everyone has a different response to it. And that is so important when it comes to having different perspectives and the way that we view the world. We have so many scientific models right now, and they're just all over the place. And they can be very useful, but they are only a representation of something that's happening in the world. But models are not the real thing. So I want to emphasize that the way that we have been taught to see the world is in fragments. And by doing that, we miss out a big part of the picture. So perception is selection, meaning that we start choosing what we're going to fixate on, what we're going to be reviewing, what we're going to be um, striving towards, and what our goals are. But we have to select something because we can't, in general, see the entire field. But seeing more of it can broaden our range of possibilities. So when we talk about selection, we are also talking about ignorance. It means we must ignore something from the complete picture. From a painting, what do you usually see more? Is it, the background? Is it the central object? But we must ignore something in order to be able to focus on something else and choose. So bringing awareness to that ignorance gives us light and allows us to reintegrate other aspects of the picture. Just like when we're looking and just reviewing the different frequencies of light. Just a rainbow, just looking at a rainbow, you can see it has different colors. And for us as humans, we'll have a different range of perception than other animals, as an example. I'm going to focus a little bit more on our day-to-day way of seeing things and how we start excluding several aspects of our daily lives and environment. So we have this human-centric point of view, which is just which is such a popular painting, represents it, putting the human at the start, bigger than everything else, and proportionally, you can just see all of those mountains and trees just looking so small. So we are just so focused on ourselves and not really looking at the rest of the picture and the background. So it's just like heliocentrism, which was focusing on the sun being the center of the universe. So I would like to propose another way of viewing things, which would be very much represented in this picture because you can, well, this painting, because you can see humans are very, very small. It's way more proportional and relative and more accurate if you see it this way. Just seeing them so small going to those buildings, which are even minuscule in comparison to all of those mountains and trees. So it provides another type of perspective, and it also implies something else, that we are truly an organism environment. So even though we focus on people, on humans, we're just using it so we can ignore something else and understand relationships. But we have to put it back together and know that we are a part of this, which is so much bigger. So I like using the Ayurvedic system to understand the different stages of illness, which starts with the mindset, which is the initial stage. And that focuses on the interaction with the world. And lifestyle is a mirror to this, because you have to navigate through life, which is navigating through your environment. It doesn't matter if it's social, if it's going out for a walk alone. It's how you choose to do things. And for doing that, you have to have a certain level of selection, which is where perception comes in. And that's where you recognize what has more value or less value to take your decisions. Now, the physiological doorway into distress is low energy. It seems like everybody's struggling for this, with this, and they're just trying to get more energy to be able to do things in their everyday living. And that's where you see the functional aspects coming in, and functional medicine starting to be a lot more popular, because overall, people aren't interested on where you start becoming so unhealthy that you need medications or you need stronger interventions. They just want to be able to think better, feel better, and everything else that has to do with the everyday living. So it all starts with energy, and low energy will drive you into those distress states. And that happens because you need energy for work. You have to perform every day. You have to do things in your everyday living. It's living, it's not a life. Living is dynamic. It has to do with so many aspects, but you really don't ever truly stop, at least in your body. Even when you sleep, it's always doing different things. So when it comes to different forms of performance in our everyday living, we can have information processing, as in feelings, which comes from our environmental input, what we feel, the air, what we hear, the noise, just visualizing, seeing things happening, touch, future orientation, which is referring to thoughts, as in thinking, or thinking about value, opinions, another way of thoughts, which has a lot to do with our perception and selection, reflections about how we're thinking about our experience, and our internal emotions that have a purpose so we can operate in a certain way. Different emotions will have a different, a distinct impact on our social settings or on our performance. What do we have to do with this? What is this emotion telling us and preparing us for? And when you put it all together, it doesn't matter what you choose. You always have to start with energy. And most functional medicine practitioners, and in general, the mainstream, is focused on ATP, which is a very, very important molecule. It's biofuel. You need it for your everyday living. And all the pathways you can think about, well, they all require energy. There are different forms of creating energy. One is aerobic and the other is anaerobic. So one just has to do with breathing, like molecular oxygen, which is high yield in energy, but it requires a lot of essential micronutrients. If you're missing at least one of them, then your energy will drop so much that it's just 13 times different. It's higher when it's aerobic, and anaerobic, it's fermentation. It's just so low that you'll start having trouble with it. But this is a chart that shows you all those vitamins, all those minerals, electrolytes, and everything that you require for high energy. But is it really where energy starts? Nobody usually asks this, but there are certain places where biophysics is a big thing, and it focuses on, okay, how do we start getting this energy, as referring to ATP? And I'd say no, it all starts with the sun. So in ancient civilizations like with the Egyptians, Romans, and Greeks, they would use sunlight as therapy. They would even they would call it heliotherapy. When it came to Romans, they would have these like these sun hospitals, and that's where people would go and just receive light and be lying down and improve their health. I know this sounds very controversial because nowadays you're told that if you get sunlight, you will always require sunblock or sunscreen, and it'll lead you into cancer. Interestingly, not only the ancient civilizations were the ones that were focusing on light, but also the US Department of Labor would have this special focus for babies. So it seems that even though it's been almost 100 years, they could understand this functional aspect of interacting with your environment and not just being sedentary without light, and how it would impact the baby's overall health. Also noticing that the darker skin you have, the more light that you would need. And it wasn't just focusing on vitamin D. I mean, don't get me wrong, vitamin D is very important, but it is actually just the hormone that comes as a response of our lifestyle, which would include sunlight and eating enough cholesterol, not just internal cholesterol. And by doing that, you have enough material and you have the right lifestyle to produce it. Now, there are different rays of ultraviolet radiation, and certain ones are more beneficial for us. I mean, we evolved with all of them, right? But there are certain times when we get more of certain forms than in others. And UVA is the one that's particularly important for vasodilation, for getting energy. And you can just see studies of how important it is and how the shift of the perception of just going for even, let's say, vitamins or medication is to the ecology. So if you want to have good vascular health, you need nitric oxide. And that goes in a free form. You'll get it free form when you have this type of UVA radiation. You also have, this is another study that is important because it talks about how we produce certain hormones, neurohormones, or hormone-like substances that vary depending on the season, having higher levels in spring and summer and lower levels in autumn and winter. This is also very noticeable and studied when talking about birds and when they learn songs and when they're pruning their neurons and preparing space to learn new songs and sing a lot more the next year, the next season, or when the volume goes down. Same thing happens with humans in the hippocampus. You can also see about the importance of the circadian rhythm of being exposed to light and how it positively affects sleep quality and well-being, and what is the best time. So when you have the sun that's on top of your head, that's not really a good sign. You'll get a lot of more of the UVB radiation instead of the UVA. And when your shadow starts getting taller throughout the day or early in the day, those are the best times. Most likely, those are the times when we would be going out and hunting or gathering during our evolutionary course. So the question turns out to be, why is sunlight so important for us and why is it so good? Well, it turns out that water absorbs light. So this has been really studied, and there have been conferences and symposiums for several years, mostly in Russia, where they are more advanced in this topic, but there are also a lot of American studies about it when it talks about how electromagnetic energy actually changes water, and it separates charges, which at the end of the day produces potential energy, which we need for work. Most of it comes from mid-infrared energy, and that's what changes bulk water into this easy water. Easy means exclusion zone water. Right here, you can just see how there's a negative charge on one side and a positive charge on another. So by doing this, it excludes this charge right here. But it also means that water is dynamic. The picture to the right is actually not in the morning, it's at night. So infrared energy is present even at night, not only in the day, but the intensity does start to reduce. And that's what produces this easy water. It can even function as battery because so much potential energy is stored there that you can use it later on. So tomatoes, potatoes can be used as batteries. They're not going to be high quality batteries, but they're still going to be batteries, or just pure salt. So when it comes to basic principles in chemistry, when they're talking about osmolarity and diffusion, well, it is still believed in the mainstream that most of it is static, but it is actually dynamic. And there are so many studies now proving this, different experiments, and you can just see how the difference in charge is actually what drives the flow. You can also see that if water does not contain salt, then diffusion isn't widespread. It takes a lot longer, and it doesn't function properly. This is an image of water in salt water and how the exclusion zones, or easy water, is much smaller, but is around all those different salt molecules. So salt, I'm talking about real salt here, not the table iodized salt, is incredibly important for health as well, for energy creation at the mitochondrial level. So when we go back to mitochondrial functioning, which is the focus of energy in general, we notice that the liver has mitochondria, which just the surface of the membrane is 20 times more than that of the liver cell. And that's also the same for different parts of the muscle inside, of the muscle, 50 times more surface than the muscle cell membrane. And also the pumping requires energy. It was thought that it was just passive and it just happened. Well, it doesn't just happen. And sunlight is important for that. But even that takes a fraction of energy. So energy is needed to release ATP, and ATP is that biofuel, which will give you this amount of energy. But what is really required to produce this is much higher than the yield of ATP. And that's where, in general, the explanation has been said like, oh, okay, well, overall, it all balances out and you'll have enough energy. Yes, that is true, but you have to start with energy in the beginning. If not, you cannot split it up and you cannot get ATP. So hydrolysis being a major component of it to split those molecules comes from this type of these properties in water of storing energy and of the water burning, which means it oxidizes. And this is an example of just how water with different radio frequencies, it can start combusting. So there's combustion and it starts burning, and this is all the energy that is freed from it. The more salt you have, the more energy it will be able to release. So salt being a major component of it, so you have high yields of energy as well. And water burning can only happen if there's salt. So without it, if you use distilled water, it will not burn. So the greatest magnetization, meaning, okay, you're using frequencies, these ultra high frequencies or other forms of radiation, that's what produces all that energy and then how it can release it. And salt doesn't really attract water. It builds EZs around it, those small exclusion zones and charges, and that's actually what's happening. There's also these type of experiments where bicarbonate solutions are being used to show how water can emit light. And this one was for a little bit more than a year, and you can just see how long it took. For the glow, it was shifting, but it had glow and energy for this amount of time. And then you could also see how the daily cycle impacts the energy in water, the glow that was being observed. So you can see the circadian type of rhythm and even a type of change in energy when you would have eclipses. So by seeing these eclipses, you can see how cosmological events actually do impact energy. And if it's impacting it, the water there, it's also, in a test tube, it's also impacting water in our body. And that'll impact our emotions, our ability to function. So it's always very useful to have a way to also be checking the weather, not just, the clouds and everything, but what about the sun weather, the solar flares, electromagnetic frequencies? And you'll notice when there are big peaks here in solar flares, people are just a lot more distressed. And solar sunspots have been studied with different types of events throughout history, and they're just highly correlated. The more amount of sunspots, the more the more stress, difficulties, and problems with interaction in people. Even you can correlate it to wars and other type of events. This is an example of how structured water as opposed to conventional water produces much more yield, and that is the only difference. So the amount is so significant that you can understand how it is important for biological systems. So just a short recap for now is that energy comes from the sun, and there is no free energy as, okay, you just get ATP. No, that can't happen, and it doesn't happen. The sun is actually the main source of fuel for all biological activity. That's where it starts. Then we have all these other molecules, and that's great, but it all starts in this part. And water is the main functional and dynamic system for absorbing energy and storing it, just like a battery. And the effects are amplified and much quicker with salt. So if it's high salt solutions, then you'll have an amplified effect. Now I'm going to go a lot deeper into the effect of salt and functional aspects of it in the next presentation. So this is an opportunity to really go back to this painting and understand how the environment is so important. And it is also a field of information because everything is interconnected. And by understanding this, just like the sun impacts the water impacts our function, our function is going to impact our social interaction. It's all just connected, and there's no way to unpeg it. It also transmits information. Everyone transmits information socially. The sun is transmitting information, and the water doesn't just absorb energy. It also absorbs information, and it is absorbed in different layers. Even the experimenters, this is the information that I'm going to present right now comes from a book, a lab that studied this for about 20 years, a German lab. And I think it's a great read, and it's also very impressive to understand how there are many aspects of our everyday living that we think are not important, but they truly are. Just by drinking tap water, you can see the difference from before and after. This is saliva that, pictures are taken before and after through a microscope, and you can just see the change in the structure. So whatever you drink will change you. You also have examples of cell phone radiation. And the before and after in 2 minutes. And when it's longer than that, you can see even more pronounced effect. Oh, you can just see it through 2 minutes of a cell phone and your blood, how it deeply impacts the way that it's structured. They also had experiments about the information transfer by resonance, and you can see these types of flowers and how you have a shift in the reference water in comparison to when the information has been transmitted. You can even see it as like a mirror. It copies that information, and you can see like small flowers in those drops of water. Even through mental support. This is another experiment of a person holding the flask of water and trying to imagine a circle or a dot at the center of the water. You can see the before and after, and very successful. Now, by having all of this information, now comes the question of how can you improve your health? So I use functional systems, dynamic systems, which are now required to be able to check your everyday life, to know what's happening, as opposed to having lab markers taken every, for longer periods of time, weeks, months, years. And this can help through another aspect, and by understanding your energy levels, then you can do something about it. You can notice if you're having more performance or less performance. This one is the BioWell, and that's what takes the different measurements from your body. And the one to the right is BioCore, which is a device that structures water. I've been using it also for about 5 years. I train people on how to use it and integrate it into their practice. But I was very interested in it when I started seeing these pictures about how a Russian electricist noticed that taking photographs of different objects, it didn't matter if they were living organisms or not, they would all emit a certain glow by using this type of technology. And that type of imaging, well, for me, visually, it's very impressive. And it also started influencing the way that health was being approached. So the BioWell, which is one of my preferred devices, takes pictures of each one of the fingers. It first emits an electric current, and that current has an impact on your body, and your body responds to it, and it emits a cloud of electrons. And then it takes a picture, amplifies it 1,000 times, and you get this glow. So after it started being studied, it was found that different segments of fingers were correlated to different organs and systems. In Russia, it is a sports system. It dynamically determines your potential. And when we're talking about physiological state, it has to do with performance. Your emotions, taking decisions, thinking about it, processing. So this is a very quick method. There are other types of devices, but I haven't found anything really similar to this that can give you an image, a true image of what your body is transmitting. So it gives you the opportunity to effectively monitor the level of your functional reserves, because you require reserves in order to function and to have quality of health. Doesn't matter if you're doing neurofeedback training, which is a prerequisite, right? You need high energy for it, or anything else. So it can also ensure a quick way of measuring the resilience to stress. And that's one of the best functions that I've found to it, because it can predict your performance. And it's actually used in the Olympics by the Russian ministry. It's a requirement. So that way it can tell you, you don't just need to do peak performance. I mean, everyday living is performance, but this will let you know how your reserves are, and it can help you take better decisions as, okay, should I take it easier or not, depending on what you're finding. Now, when it comes to sports, you've got the Russian ministry that started using it for test practice, and they had studies done which could tell you about the level of performance. This was also used, I didn't want to put too many studies about it, but also in the Air Force to predict how the pilots would be able to perform and incidences. So this is an example of a brain map which has very marked asymmetry. You can just see it, the hypoconnectivity, but the symmetry is so pronounced that I started being curious of what we would be able to see if we started using these different methodologies in combination. And what I found, for example, in this case, you can just see the lower energy in the cerebral zone, and you can start seeing a level of asymmetry. So there's more going towards the orange and even going into the orange part on the right side than on the left side. And the right hand is going to be inverted for the brain. So then you would have the lower level on the left side of the brain. And you can just see another example right here of a strong asymmetry and the organ disbalance, because the machine also measures not only stress and energy, but also a disbalance. What is it? So is it going more to the right side in general or to the left side? So you can just see the predominant aspect of it. This is another example of TBI and inflammation. So when it comes to brain trauma, which is localized in this brain map, you can also see that there are levels of inflammation throughout the body. And this is particularly useful because, in my point of view, because you can just see what the opportunity points are, like the respiratory system, right? Right here, the jaw and teeth grinding can tell you about anxiety, can tell you about what a person is eating at night, and it can produce night terrors or just that anxiousness and bracing. You can also see the liver being high in energy. So by understanding these different aspects and thyroid and just having inflammation, these tendencies, then you can use them also for advising people on, okay, let's take this functional integrative approach and not just stick to the brain map, which brain map is fantastic. It'll give you so much information. But by doing this, you have an additional layer of understanding, okay, well, how's your overall function? You know, are you sitting too much? Are you more sedentary right here? What are you eating? You know, for some reason, colon is going a little bit lower here relatively to the other parts. So maybe hot sauces, dehydration also a component. And that way you can have another approach in order to really be able to advise, and depending on your knowledge, you can use it. But in either case, you can take one measurement after another and it takes a few minutes, which is one of the major benefits in my practice, because you know, when people are coming in, you don't have as much time to be doing brain maps constantly, or you can't monitor it that well. You have to wait some time also between differences. But if you have all these different measurements, then you can show a tendency. This is another example of asymmetry and organ disbalance. So these are older measurements from a few years back. But even then, you can notice, for example, here, there's probable inflammation, and it's all shifting to one side of the body predominantly.
Just so you know, Yannick, it's about quarter till, just so you have a time frame.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Yep.
So by doing this, you can start noticing how what to tackle, where to go to, and have a comparison, you know, a quick functional comparison to see if something's working, if something isn't working that much, and course correcting. This is another form of measuring different segments, either if it's balance or just pure energy, and the systems. So that way you can also draw more attention to different aspects of your approach. Right here, we have another example of high energy, healthy functional energy. You have, this is just all of the fingers put together, the different regions of it. And you can see the flow of energy. Some parts, it's not unhealthy, but you can see some opportunities here, some fragmentation, or the cortex, the brain cortex, which would be this region, a little bit the throat here, or lungs. But one single image, and not also requiring different parameters and measurements, can let the person see it, and it's also visually very appealing. You know, but the information that it provides, I found it very useful. This is an example of taking vitamin B3, the niacin flush, when you get a lot of energy, and if people aren't used to that, they can feel anxious. But if you're used to it, you know that you can get so much done after that, and you can just see the energy levels improve by about 15 to 20%. And this is about 30 minutes after that when it was subsiding, going back to normal ranges. So that way you can also test certain types of vitamins and see the outcomes, or any type of treatment. This is also an example of intramuscular vitamin B1, B6, and B12 in Mexico, very easy to get. And, you know, just have a shot of it. And this energy not being about one hour like the niacin, but throughout the entire day. So for highly productive days, you can even prepare and do that proactively. Or when you know that you're not feeling as well, so someone that's really low energy, 30s or 40s, they'll go to healthier levels. And you do that frequently, and it'll just continue improving. These are also examples of one of the devices that actually does something, because the BioWell doesn't really do anything, but it'll give you information. It'll help you focus on certain aspects of the lifestyle that you can change. maybe it be nutrition, physical activity, or you name it, right? But then you get to a point where maybe you just need an improvement for peak performance, or therapeutically just to improve function. And this is a measurement that I did of tap water. I didn't even add salt to it. And we know that salt is very important to be able to create more structured water, and how the brightness started increasing after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So it starts charging, it starts gaining energy. This is another example of tap water, and then the water after the BioCore, which is that device that structures water. So by doing this, you're adding fuel, a different type of fuel for your cells to carry out your everyday function. And this is more, it would be called, well, quantum medicine, right? It's energy, it's light medicine, all these type of different wording to it. But bottom line, we're just looking for more energy, feel healthier, and to be able to do whatever it is we want to do. So how do you build easy water in your cells? Just in general, you need water, you need salt, and you need sunshine. So working in the office all, the entire day without going out, not going out for a walk and getting some sun before you go to bed, a few hours before you go to bed, not having enough salt in your water going into your system, you'll be taxed. So by doing these simple measures, and you can call it an intervention if you want, I just call it like a daily required habit that we've lost, then you can improve your function. Green juicing also has a lot of this plant cell water, which is also structured water. Extreme high frequency devices like the one that I showed in the chart before, that it starts changing water and you can absorb it. The infrared saunas, which are also very popular right now. So you can have benefits because of the infrared light. Or grounding. You get this constant flow of electrons going into your body and just recharging, and not just the antioxidant effect. I mean, it creates this type of required energy. So you need the sun. You also need to be touching the ground, and where we're living, even concrete doesn't transmit it that well. So you really need to be able to go outside barefoot and walk on the grass and on the dirt, and just the natural way of how we evolved and how we produce energy. It's not all food, it's not all nutrition, and behavior is you need energy as a prerequisite to have motivation and different types of behavior. If not, then you will become depressed. You won't have enough energy to do it. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And now if there are any questions, we could start. Hello?
Hi, this is
There we go.
this is Terry. Question about the product. I'm a gadget. I love gadgets that can help you be healthier. Is it something that like anybody can purchase and quickly be able to use, or does it take a lot of instruction?
It can be purchased and it can be used, but if you really want to understand it well and get more out of it, then for that you can get certified, which doesn't take that long. It takes about 2 to 3 days depending, on the amount of hours, but it depends on if it's just for personal use or if it's for clinical. If it's for clinical, then I do highly recommend going through the certification and understanding how to use it and using real cases. But for personal use, I mean, just looking at it, you can say, hey, I'm low energy, I'm high energy, I'm having these spikes here, so you can test that. So a quick way of learning just how to take the measurement could be enough to get started.
And then
Are there,
what to do about it? What, I mean, when you know that information, then does it provide any, information about what to do next or not really?
It doesn't provide information what to do next. It provides information about, okay, what are the most important parts? So if you're looking at the GI tract part, which is, a lot of inflammation there or very low, then you can focus a little bit on that part. If you can see that, for example, the pineal is having some issues, then you can focus on sleep. If you find that stress levels are high, then it really does depend on the methodology of the practitioner. What you can do immediately, for example, is with a device that structures water, and it also, you get a special tune depending on measurement of each person, and you download that song to the device and the person can hear it so they can have immediate relief. It takes about 6 minutes, so you get the energy through one of the, how do you call this? Well, the parts of the device that you put on your forehead, and then you also listen to that and you'll have an immediate response, but it'll take, well, immediate, talking about 6 minutes. So that's if you have absolutely no tools, you can go for that, or you can use it to amplify, the results of the methods that you already have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
good question. This is Rob and comment. I had read a while back that ideally one should get up in the morning with first light when the sun's rising to go out for about 30 minutes to get sunshine to set your circadian rhythm. And then in the evening, as the sun is setting, is the time to go out because that's where you get your natural melatonin triggered from the sun setting and sort of the sun's red light. So does that fit with that sort of the same model you were saying?
Yes, because when the sun's coming up, the atmosphere, well, the rays that are going through the atmosphere, it's a lot thicker. So when it's coming up or when it's going down, at the sunset, then you still get benefits. So both times are actually good. When it's at the highest part, you can get it, but you want to cover yourself a little bit more because if not, you can get your skin burnt a little bit.
The sunburn,
So
right?
yeah, you can get a sunburn. So that's when you would, you can go out and it's fine. It's just that you have to cover yourself a little bit more, and it really does depend. Like if you're in the northern part of the hemisphere, then it'll be more intense.
Right.
So you just want to take some precautions as to if it's at midday, then just cover yourself a little bit more just so you don't get any sunburn, and that's it.
I have a quick question for you. You're talking about cell phones, and I couldn't quite grasp that when you're using a cell phone, is it putting energy in you don't want, or is it taking energy out? Is it using your energy?
Oh, well, with the cell phone, it's influencing the structure of the water in your body, and your blood's made out of water. So at the end of the day, it's it's a stressor because it's not a natural wavelength that you would find, coming from the sun or anything. So the body doesn't cope well with it. It hasn't evolved to cope with it. So then it'll reduce your function. Those were just pictures of like, okay, so it seems that this is how it's changing. It just seems more erratic. It's more chaotic. That's what happens. But for example, if you use the device, you could talk for 10 minutes and have a measurement prior to and after that, and then you'll see your own energy levels and stress levels. That's how you could use it and know how much it's impacting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Time for a few more questions, folks, if anybody has one.
I'm wondering, this is Bobby, if one can have like a bowl of salty popcorn and water that's like reverse osmosis water with the remineralizing drops, and if that would provide the salt. It's not so healthy, but it.
Well, the popcorn isn't usually going to contain Himalayan or sea salt. So if you were to prepare your own popcorn and add some salt to it, that would be much better, because if not,
Yeah.
you're probably going to get MSG, and you're going to get a bunch of stuff that you don't want. So if you
Yes.
add your own salt, that would be, a natural form of salt, either if it's mined or from the sea, that would be much better. And if you use reverse osmosis, well, yeah, you're spot on. You're going to need to remineralize it. So you have to use your taste as an indicator, because if you're really craving that popcorn and it's more salty, then you need a lot more. I'm going to go a lot more into this in the next presentation. I'm going to focus heavily on salt, but you can definitely have a healthier meal if you prepare it, use the right salt, and also don't drink just pure reverse osmosis water. You need to add salt to it necessarily.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So, so do you look at lab work, or do you measure salt and electrolytes, or does this device, is it able to do that? Or I know it's a loaded question, but
And Yannick, before you
whatever you
answer
can
that
answer.
question, this is Rob. I've got to go to I've got to moderate another webinar at 1 o'clock for
Okay.
ISNR. So I'm going to say goodbye now. Thank you. And Aaron and Judy and Veronica will get you signed off today. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks. Look forward to part 2 and 3 and 4 and 5.
So going back to the question about lab work, I usually don't request lab work. A lot of people can't send them or can't get them or are not willing to. If I have it, it's much better. I'll have a lot more information, and you'll just find correlations with the device and functional medicine indexes or the lab work. But if you want to, for example, use the device, then you check how you feel before and after. So drinking the water with salt, it has to be to the taste. And then you'll see like, okay, let's see the cerebral vessels or the cardiovascular system. And if that starts improving in other parameters, then it's you know it's working, right? So that's an example. The blood serum tests, they really aren't functional. You can have appropriate levels at one point in time, but then they drop. So that's the problem with lab tests. I mean, you can notice a really prolonged state with a lab test, but in any case, I mean, if you drank a lot more salty water that day, then, or the night before, then you might have results in a healthier range, as opposed to being very low on salt, as an example. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I think that we have to close off now. I think a little after 1, people getting back to what they're doing. I know, Yannick, we want to thank you tremendously for preparing this, and it's just gives so much food for thought and understanding, and I look forward to the next presentation on using salt to better advantage, because it's hard from the medical background to say, put salt in your body. For some, when the medical model talks a lot about some of the problems that can come from too much salt. So, it's like new information to assimilate.
Oh yes, definitely. Shifting a perspective or a certain model, it's kind of scary for some people, but yeah, there's definitely a lot to digest here, to really ponder on, and even going at it from a more cautious approach and not high salt levels. Then you can just see how you feel. But even then, next presentation, I'm going to go really deep into that.
Good. We look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I can't wait for the next one. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for participating.